Welcome to the Summer of Woo, you radiant brightlings. This season, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry is casting a light on all things mystical. By tapping into the magic in and all around us, we'll better connect to our individual and collective sacredness so we can shine our brightest. Join us in this 6 episode mini season as we open ourselves up to mystery and woo.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy.
I have a confession, an on-air confession, as I usually do when we open these. Um, I know a few episodes ago I proclaimed myself a woo girl,
Yeah.
but I have to admit, uh, in comparison to what is out there in the world, and definitely in comparison to you, I am woo light. Or woolite, as our Google Doc changed it to. And so I have felt like a bit of a poser as we have been crafting our summer of woo. I was really excited when we decided to talk about it and get back into these things on the podcast on air. I know we share stuff all the time. But to be honest, what we've talked about in season one or in earlier episodes of the show is kind of like where I've topped out at my woo education and
Oh,
teachings. I I see practitioners. I wouldn't say that I have a mentor or a teacher in these things, although they definitely could be those things. Um, but I don't have a practice. And I think that's why I feel like a poser is I'm not consistently practicing, but I am interested and semi invested.
I agree. And I know you just said probably I'm woo like compared to you, but I feel that I've been searching for a practice that not only makes sense to me, but is enjoyable and sustainable. And so I have little tiny things that I do. And maybe, all right, I'm going to back up because when you first were talking, I was like, no, Tracy, you're totally woo. I think that like how with strengths, you take your strengths for granted. I feel like you're taking your woo for granted. And I think you're more woo than you feel. But
Some
I
people
also,
would take that as such an insult. You're so woo woo, Tracy. Sorry. Okay, so take it back.
and so that I'm wondering if maybe we hold ourselves to a higher standard of what we think it should look like.
Well, and I guess that's thank you. I guess that is somewhat fair to point out that I'm holding myself to the standards of those I'm looking to learn from,
Yeah.
right? And they're already masters in a sense, or already are very cultivated or very sustained in what they're doing or what they're teaching, at least, right? It doesn't mean that they aren't too. I love that you said searching. So when I do have a teacher, I should say. I follow Nicole Nardoni, who practices in Minneapolis and
Yes.
now I think New Mexico and online, but I have taken things with her. But it's always just been whatever she's offered, right? That just like I will do whatever that woman is willing to teach and share. But whenever she's teaching us, she does always reference her teachers and what she's learning, right? And so she's not necessarily teaching us things she doesn't know yet either. She's just reached what I'm looking to attain.
Yeah.
But I love that you said sustainable, and I think that's what's gotten me so far is everything I've been interested in and searching for or that I've tried hasn't. I guess in hindsight, I'm going to say it hasn't been sustainable, right? Like, and maybe that means it just wasn't right. Maybe it means I wasn't invested enough. But that sustainability piece to it, I think, is key for a practice to take root.
So I think that the sustainability piece is key for so many aspects of our life, not just woo. It's health, eating right. I mean, just so many different things. And so I'm wondering if it's
Oh,
endemic of of like culture and society and social media and the fact that every freaking person has ADD and I don't know.
I love though, you compared it to other things we do in life that may or may not be sustainable, like any goal should be sustainable, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you think of the woo-woo-ness of life and spirituality and ritual, um, adding the word goal to it steals from it, right? Like it takes away from the
Yeah.
magic. But at the same time, if you want to do something well or be consistent, you do need goals, you do need practice, right? Ritual, as you break it down, is a practice. But, I a lot of times it's one of the first things to go when other things
Mm.
aren't going well or when other things come up, because it feels like an add-on to life, right? Like a lot of people, I used to work in an eating disorder clinic, and one of the biggest challenges was an alcoholic can avoid alcohol to a certain degree in their life. You can't avoid food. You
Mhm.
have to have food, right? And so when it comes to these rituals and practices for our spirituality or connection or spiritual health, um we need them. Like we need food, but we treat them like we don't. And I think that's why I stay in this place of searching and wanting and feeling like I'm not doing enough.
Yes, what a good point. Because we treat it like it's some kind of dessert or something that you can just leave off of the menu. Or sometimes I treat it as if I can't give it the it's almost like if I can't give it the time and the sacredness and just the just making it this really cool sacred practice, if I can't give it that kind of emphasis, that I don't do it at all. And so it's sort of, again, to compare it to something else, it's like, well, I have time to take a 15-minute walk, but I really wanted to do an hour-long hot yoga, and I don't have time for that. Well, I'm not doing anything.
Or if I were to tell the majority of people in my life, oh, I need to push XYZ back 30 minutes. I haven't eaten today. They'd be like, oh my God, yeah, go get food or we can do it together, this or that. But I think you're one of the few people in my life that I can say, hey, can we record late? I just need to meditate real quick, right? Like I can't, how many
Yes.
people can show up late to work because like, oh, I woke up late, but I had to get that meditation in is never a good excuse. But if you were like, oh, I had to stop and get my coffee. That's understandable, right? Like it's also
It's
like you
such a
said,
good
culture.
point. Yes, such a
It
good point. I think if you worked at Oprah, then you
yeah,
could get away with
there's a few
that.
exceptions to the rule, right? But so if everybody else, I was just telling Amy, like I don't even remember who I was 6 months ago, in like
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
come up with rituals and routines and processes in my life. But I do remember that, in talking to you right now, like I was doing the 40-day practice at the end of the year, not to just reconnect spiritually, but to reconnect with me as a whole, that I had just let life and the things we have to do or you think you have to do take over and had gone on autopilot and was stressed and all this. And part of that was doing a 40-day Kundalini meditation, Satanama Kriya. And it's all about seed planting. And I did it so that it would be a part of my winter solstice rituals. And it ended on New Year's Eve. And then on New Year's Day, I was attending again one of Nicole Nardoni's workshops. And she introduced me to a new Kriya that time. And I was like, oh, what a great way to kick off the year. This will be, I'm going to do a 90-day practice, right? And so here I was like thinking like, oh, I just did a 40-day practice, which is the most I think I'd ever done at that point. I've done a few 40, but I don't know if I've ever made it to 90. And so this one, I made it to 90. And like Amy, between the 40 and the 90, like as proud as I am for sticking through it and like it felt good in the moment, life got worse. Life got worse and life got harder, and I haven't really meditated since. I've had a few half-hearted attempts because I think it'll get better. I think it'll help me connect. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. meditate kind of a thing. And so I just have been wondering, why do you ritual? Like,
That's a really good question. And I want to answer it, but also I want to go back to the 40-day and the 90-day and you saying that life got worse. You said to me one day, quite a few years ago, correlation does not equal causation.
I say that like twice a day, every day to anybody who will listen.
Well, I listened. I listened. And also not to be Pollyanna in the moment, but sometimes when you plant a seed, what comes up first? Not the bud, the dirt, because the dirt is being displaced as the plant is growing. So your life did get worse. It was the shits. But I think that it's one of those things.
And I
If
don't
you
want to say that because I did it, life got worse. No.
Nope, I
And I don't want
know.
to say that I was doing it purely to like an ask of the universe. Like, look at me being a good little spiritual girly, like I did my thing for 90 days. Look at me. No, it was, to me, it was part of it was just like, can I have dedication and discipline to myself and to this practice and do it? Yes. But I very specifically chose both of those mantras for what I was hoping it would bring into my life.
Okay.
Now, another friend of ours did point out to me, maybe it could have got even worse. Doing those things maybe prevented some stuff. But I just, it's so much of spirituality to me, especially when life is going wrong, I wonder if I don't ever want it to be performative to the universe, God, whatever. I grew up in a Catholic, non-denominational, Presbyterian kind of environments and Sunday schools and things like that, where just like pray to God and God will answer the prayers of the good people, right? I'm not saying that that's how all religion is or even those ones are, but that's how little 13-year-old me remembers it, right? Like, and then Garth Brooks sweeps in and tells you thank God for unanswered prayers sometimes, right? So
I've literally just heard that song today.
but so it feels like sometimes with the spirituality, there's this call and responseness to it, right? And I don't like feeling like I have to pay in, but I also don't like feeling like everything I'm doing is an ask, right? Like,
Yeah.
but then what's that in between? And
so I mean, for me, ritual is so I feel connected. Not so that something will be given to me or that so I can receive, although I do feel it is an opening to reception, but it is for connection. For me, it's connection, whether it's connection to God, source, angels, guides, my mom, my dad, my grandma, who knows, but it's connection. Now, is there a layer where I'm hoping somebody's like the $1 million is in the, third drawer from the left? I don't think so, but
yeah,
so
I don't feel like I have my own personal universe concierge checking off my list of requests and seeing what he can fulfill in the moment on his shift, right? But there is, another saying I say all the time is we tend to judge ourselves on intent and others on behavior. And I think what I like about that connection to spirituality that you talk about is I feel like the universe also judges on intent. Right? Or like that it feels that way. I think that's why people seek out forgiveness from God or seek out spirituality for forgiveness and to restart in life, right? And that you can reset, right, a little bit easier spiritually and internally than you can in the real world and in the culture that you described earlier. When thinking about ritual, I found an NPR article from 11/11/22. So way to go, NPR. Excellent scheduling on content that way.
Wow.
On setting up an altar, and we'll get more into that later, and we'll link to it in our Instagram. But they quoted, I think it's Thosh Collins. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but they described it as rituals being a set of actions to help us to acknowledge things that are very sacred and special to us.
That's lovely.
That is lovely. And I think that also helps with like my internal, hoping somebody will come in and save everything, right? That's those are just me thinking of things that are important to me. It's not just me thinking of, like a little Christmas wish list for the universe. um but so because I do look to it for connection, right? And for meaning and purpose. I do like the randomness of life, but it is kind of nice to think that we all are connected, or that there is something greater. The sum is greater than the
Whole of its parts.
Is that
No,
the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh.
Thank
We've
you.
said this over and over again, that to the point where now we don't even remember what it is. What was
But
Go
so
ahead.
but I feel like that's why I let ritual go, is not that my requests weren't being answered. It's that life was getting so bad that I felt like this act of connection I was doing, one, was just for the discipline of it towards the end, right? The 40-day one, I think why I've never really done it more than 40 days is the ones I've chosen in the past have felt like they've run their course. Not necessarily that I was tracking it, but that they did what I needed them to do, and I needed to level up or move on, grow and move into the next one. This one, I felt like I was forcing it. And so maybe I should have let it go. But then part of me was like, oh, maybe that's part of the process. Maybe that's why it is 90 days, right? Is to get through that hump. And then I got to the 90 days and I thought about doing it more. And I was like, oh, no, I did. I got to the 120 days, which is the next. And then the one after that is a year. And so at 120 days, I was like, we're not doing this for a year. Like, and part of me was like, oh God, you don't have another 120 days in you though. Like, start another starter pack set of days in you to do this. What if this is another hump? And then I was just like, I'm not prepaying the universe. Like, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. This isn't a deposit on a future life. If they need to give me some better signs or better support, because I'm tapping out. It just feels forced. And so I let it go. I let the ritual go. And then things got worse.
Okay, so I would say that at that point, something that I turn to when things start feeling like that is then I ask the question for meditation, like, is this what I should be doing? Should I be continuing? And if I don't get a clear answer that way, then I get the cards out and I do it that way. Like, I am going to ask for direction.
See, and I think at that point I had slowly started letting all ritual go. So for me,
Okay.
part of why I was letting ritual go, and probably why it wasn't feeling like I was connecting as much, I hurt my back again. And then as it started to get better and I had surgery and all this, and on the day it was like supposed to be like, all right, we're on the up and up, it re-injured itself in the other direction. And the injury itself is my root chakra. It's at my root chakra point. And that
dear
is
God, Tracy.
have we not talked about this, Amy? Right? Like, that is your connection to everything. And so it makes sense for me why I let ritual go and why I'm in this rest period.
Oh, yeah.
But there have definitely been other times in my life where I've abandoned rituals for things other than what we talked about at the top of the hour of, just like work, school, life. So why do you think we let rituals go?
Oh my gosh. I feel like sometimes what happens is those little things that come up, right? The little thing that comes up and you forget to meditate, or you're like, I don't have time today. And then the next day something else maybe comes up. And then you don't have time to do this other thing. And then all of a sudden it's become a habit of not doing the ritual. And so then it's sort of that muscle memory where then you're like, oh, I have to start doing that again. And typically what happens with me is I'm looking at like, oh, maybe my planner or something where I go, oh, I've forgotten to say this XYZ prayer 3 days in a row. What is wrong with my head? I promised myself I would do this 3 days in a row. So then I go into a spiral of what's wrong with me, that
Oh,
I can't stick with something. So then, it's like, oh, okay, let's just stop. Let's just start again. But I think that, again, what I talked about earlier, culturally, society, we're bombarded with so many things that it's easy. And like you said, it's the first thing to go because it's like an add on. So is it that we've been raised that it's not important? Or, and yet, raised a Catholic, so many ritualistic things were important for a very long time. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's like, oh, I didn't want to be doing rituals,
yeah.
but I don't
Well, as
know.
soon as judgment and guilt comes in, like you said, when I start chastising myself for not doing it, that makes me want to reject it even more, which
Yeah,
isn't fair to the practice because that's a mindset issue, right? Like that's a mindset correction. But there are so many things when it comes to, the spirituality placed upon us when we were younger or before
right.
we started making choices, and the things that are ingrained in us and things like that, that it seeps in. And you do, I get extra protective of like trying to avoid the things that make me feel bad about such a beautiful what should be such a beautiful thing.
Right.
But you don't want to do a 180 and just like go back to doing nothing, right? I think one thing for me that also happened around that time, um, that forced a mindset change about it and made me okay with taking the break at the time. But I have been getting frustrated at the extendedness of the break or the disconnection. I may have spoken on this before, but there's a practitioner that I have used individually. And I've invited her into my home. We've done things virtually. I've really enjoyed working with her, and I always feel better the more that I work with her, and I learn from her during our one-on-ones. And she started offering online virtual group meditation sessions. And so I got really excited and I bought all of them that she had done. And during the third one, I not only got virtually kicked out, like something happened where like I got kicked out of the room, but when I went to like reconnect it, I like accidentally like blew a fuse in my office, closing my like lowering my desk. Like it was like while things were trying to reconnect, I was like, oh well, I'll sit instead of stand, and it pinched the power cord, which like made my power adapter blow, which blew a fuse. And so I ran around the house doing all that, and then while it was connecting, I got physically sick the next time I got in the room. I all of a sudden like had food poisoning or like a stomach thing, and like I just had to like stop, and I messaged her after and she shared a recording with me. And then the next weekend, I couldn't get in virtually again. Like it would not let me into the room. And so she recorded it after trying to troubleshoot and was like, I don't want to mess up everybody else's experience, right? And then the third week after that, again, we couldn't get in. And so then she messaged me, and, most practitioners, because I paid for these, like I paid for these, she's like, here's your money back. I checked in with my guides. This is just not right for you. And like that kind of hurt at first and was like, what? Like, but then after I kind of sat with that for a little bit, that first one that I did with them, I wasn't fully in the meditation, and I definitely postponed the one that she had recorded for me, because when I reflect on it, I've outgrown those kinds of group meditations. I love working with her individually, but when some of these practitioners are doing it for a group, or when they have a specific topic, and you just sign up for all of them and suddenly you're meditating on finances and that's not where you are, right? Like it just kind of felt forced. And so I was like, God bless her guides, because I would have kept trying to force it when either it's not for me or I've outgrown it. So I wonder if sometimes we outgrow our rituals. because
Oh,
they're tradition, because they're sustained, because we think we should, because we're tied to it, because they brought something. Like I said, one of these meditations I'd done before, and I always do it at this time of year, and I just wouldn't like let go that I have to plant these seeds, right? And like now I'm like, Nicole doesn't even do this one in like her workshops and programs and classes anymore. Like, why won't you grow and level up for, like, yes, it has brought us so much in the past. And so yeah, this year, like usually I do like this one workshop that she did years ago, and it brought me my home that I love. It brought me my new job. It brought me so much that I love in my life that like I now make myself do it every summer solstice. And like
oh.
last year it felt so forced. And so this year I was like, just don't do it. Just don't do, you're perverting it at this point, right? Like this is not the ritual
But
for you.
what I love, Tracy, is that you said, why you asked yourself, why can't you just level up and do the next thing for this version of you? I love that. And I hadn't thought about growing out of our rituals, but of course we do, because we're not the same person who started doing that ritual because per more than
We did
likely
the ritual.
because of the ritual, right? It's like, why do you keep going back to third grade? Why would you want to keep going to third grade?
Yeah, and I see all these spiritualist mentors, I don't know what they like to be called, on like TikTok and YouTube and all this stuff, just talking about how all these light workers are like being leveled up, or like moving and advancing all these ways, and I always roll my eyes at it. I don't know why. And well, I know I do, because it sounds like pop stars back in like the MTV Making the Music day, where they're like, we're going to the next level, level up, right? But it's we're growing, we're learning more as a collective, we're learning more as individuals, we have more resources than ever. But now I'm trying to figure out how to invite the ritual back in.
So, what are you going to do?
I don't know, because like part of me feels like I need ritual summer school because I quit, right?
Right?
And
I
so
feel the same way.
right, and so part of me is like remedial spirituality, and then the other part of me is like, that's what got you into this, dummy. Just
No,
dive
summer
in.
school. Okay, summer school, but I don't think it's a master's. It's one of those. It's not remedial, but I do think I need a guide. Like
I think I need a teacher. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that that's one of the things that's been really hard. I sought one out pre-pandemic, and sadly it wasn't a good match, and then sadly she had passed. But so like I pulled out some of the modules she had given me, and I was like, it wasn't a match then because you outgrew them before you even did them, right? So like don't do them again. But how do you find um a teacher or a guide in that area? And then came social media.
Right.
So I saw something on social media that I downloaded that I really liked, and was like, oh, maybe this is a future episode, right? And so I saved it, I put it in a folder, and I didn't think about it again, right? Then yesterday, one of my mentors that the one that was like, these courses aren't for you, she posted something, and I sent it to our podcast on Instagram, because it's like, oh, if this comes up in today's conversation, maybe I'll post it. And so today, before recording, I was like, oh, I should check out that person's profile, make sure like they're in line with what we talk about and they're a good human, right? And so I went, and like it turned out it's the same person of that thing that I saved weeks ago.
Amazing
And
synchronicity.
I I told you earlier, I was like 2 years deep liking things on her Instagram because it felt so right. And like I went back and rewatched that video from TikTok, and
Yeah.
she focuses a lot in on ancestral healing. I've been trying really hard. I haven't heard her or anybody else say her name out loud, but I think it's Ahime Aura. She also
Okay.
goes by Iya on somewhere, so we'll link to her, or I haven't asked out to her if we can post some of her stuff so we can direct people to her page. But she was featured also in the NPR article I mentioned earlier about creating an ancestral altar. But the TikTok that I saw, She is saying so many people are trying to give you blessings, but that are unable to locate you because you're hiding. And
Ooh.
the whole thing was all about allowing yourself to be perceived. And that was what I had in mind for a future episode. I completely missed the fact that she was telling you that so many people blessings, it's about your ancestors. So when I went to her Instagram page, she says, open up to newfound miracles and tap into their power. They don't just exist at the altar space. The altar is their home, but they live in you. And she's talking about just ask your ancestors questions. Ask them to tell you where things are. Ask them to tell them where you should be. Like you were just saying, ask them to tell you what your rituals should be. Ask them to tell you who your teacher is, right? Like
Yeah.
everything was about like asking the ancestors. So I think that might be where I start.
So,
Yeah.
so that is what you're saying. Instead of finding this teacher, you're actually going to go and find a teacher or a mentor that is an ancestor. Is that what you're saying? Or is what you're saying is I'm going to start with ritual again by opening myself up to be perceived by my ancestors?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to start with is just what she says about just talk to your ancestors wherever you are. So I think, in the past when I have done things, I've just opened it up to the universe, guides, forces, of the seen and unseen realms interested in my highest good, right? Like I've
Yeah.
always kind
Yeah.
of put it to that. And anytime any of my workshops have focused on ancestors, it's always felt weird to me because the quote unquote ancestors, people in my life who have known who have passed. I don't even think I was 21 by the time they died. I had a lot of death or there's a lot of death in my family into my teenage years. And so I feel weird, both I don't want to bother the dead and it's like, oh, I don't know if they like knew me or we didn't really have that connection or I didn't know them as an adult, right? And then I just never really knew a lot about tapping into the ancestors of before, right? Like way back in the line, whether bloodline or spiritual guides.
Mm.
But ancestors have
Yeah.
come up a lot for you lately.
Well, I would say specifically to one ancestor, my mother. So my sister messaged me the other day, and actually we talked on the phone, and she said I had lunch with a friend who is very connected spiritually and is a medium. And this friend said, your mom's been coming through a lot lately, and she is done resting and is ready. She's bored. It's so on brand for my
She's
mother.
bored.
She's
Here I am not wanting
bored.
to bug the dead, and your mom's like, knock, knock, knock. Let's
Now,
hang
I have
out.
also been told that the dead like their rest as well. So she's rested. She died in 2019. It's 2023. And now she's like, okay, I am ready and I want to help. She actually named someone specifically, my oldest. And she said, you tell her to ask for help. And this is the key part of this is that your ancestors, you could be like, I wish this, I wish that, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to swoop in. You literally have to ask. And like you said, open yourself up to being perceived so they can find you. But you want to ask. You have to ask for what it is you want or need or whatever. You can't just assume, someone's going to like I believe in ESP, but it's just not how this works.
Yeah, well, and it feels like permission, right? Because if we consider this Earth school and that we came down here, there's an autonomy, there's a free will to it, right? Doesn't mean you can't ask for help. I think we talked about the same thing with some of our gods and goddesses episodes where you can't just broadly put it out there. You have to specify who you want to work with and how they can help you. And it damn well better be a way that they can help,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think the other thing too is like I love to make it, like if you wanted to make it a huge ritual and like cleanse your space and cleanse yourself and do all that, you can. But you can also, I've gotten in my car, I've got a little bell in my car, I got a little crystal in my car. Never know when you might need a bell and a crystal. And like ring that bell. I ring that bell, and that's sort of like a little clearing of energy. And then I'm just like, okay, mom, hey, what's happening? Like, can you help me with this? And then I just start talking to her.
And I think what I've gotten wrong in some of those spaces is I've just been more like, Jesus, take the wheel, right? Like I am very broad in my asks. And I think why, 5 years
Oh,
ago, those rituals worked so well is I had a specific ask, and it was a definite need. And again, like we said, some of this is just about connection. I mean, for me, especially with ancestors, I've been coming to terms with, life isn't looking exactly in a way that I had thought it would by now. Not that I was super held to that, but I just, if not that, then what? Or what is the point of all this? And kind of purpose-driven thoughts. And I had this moment in front of my closet upstairs where it was just like, God, why aren't I just happy with what I have? And a voice in my head was just like, this life wasn't meant to give you happiness. This life was to give you peace. And like,
what?
that just, it clicked for me in that moment. The life I have, people in my lineage, women in my lineage specifically, have probably wished for the level of peace and autonomy that I have right now.
That is
And
full body
that,
chills.
right, that me bitching and moaning about it not looking a different way and not taking not having enough gratitude, I felt like in that moment, for how let's say I did get everything I wanted, I would be wishing for the moment of peace I had in front of that closet right then and there, right? That like everything in hindsight. But there's probably a lot of women in my life who wish that they had a full-time job, who wish that they owned a home, who wish that they had the peace here, who wish that they weren't um belonging to a man, right? Like think of how far back you have to go. And even like women that I've known in my life didn't have a lot of the privileges that I have today. And my sisters have some of those privileges too, but I was like, oh, cool, okay, peace. I can deal with that. But so I kind of want to connect with those ancestors and be like, all right, we did this, got 40 years of this. Can we maybe everybody gets what they want in a happy way for the next 40
Yeah.
years, right? Like can it change? What's the growth from here? I think I need to connect with them and also maybe like share with them what I have, right? Like not just an altar to honor them and thank them for getting me here, but
Oh, I love
look at what
that.
I have, right? Like
Because then
what,
you're healing, you're retro healing, right?
right? That generational trauma isn't just
Yeah.
forward healing.
Yeah.
I feel like it can go back.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I have a little surprise for you before we go.
All right.
Um, Back when we first started, and we had Hidden Woo in our show, we used to do a tarot card pull.
Yeah.
And so I did one, and we got the Lovers. What
All
do you
right.
think that's about?
Well, the lovers is not always the lovers. The lovers can be a choice that needs to be made, but also the lovers is you look at Adam is the conscious, looking at Eve, the subconscious, looking at the angel, who's the superconscious. But also, when I look at this, it could be when you think of Adam and Eve as the first couple, that's going way, way back, right? The angel could be, I mean, it could be generational. It could be, that's super interesting. I got to think about that.
I mean, it definitely looks like it goes back to the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So for
back to the
rituals, go back to
beginning.
the beginning. So thank you for
Yeah.
listening. Check us out on Instagram. I'm not going to do our whole thing. We appreciate you. You know how the internet works. You can find us. Have a bright and magical day.
Bye.